Hello, we're going to have a look at a couple of examples of websites that look as if they might be quite useful to begin with, but when you start digging a little bit more, they start looking a little bit different. So the first website we're going to have a look at, we need to access through archive.org and the Wayback Machine. The Wayback Machine is somewhere where you can sometimes find websites that have been taken down, and you'll be able to find a snapshot of that website at a point in time, or just snapshots at a point in time of existing websites, but it's a useful tool to know about. And the reason we have to use this for this particular website is that it was taken down some time ago for reasons that will become evident. And the website in question is martinlutherking.org. So the Wayback Machine has found a timeline of all the different years that the website was up. So I'm going to go back to the early days, and I'm going to go back to the year 2000. And I'm just going to click one of the snapshots at random, and we'll go and have a look at the website. Now, if you typed into Google a search on Martin Luther King, because that's what you were looking for information on, then this would probably come out, at the time that the website was up, it would come out probably first, second, third, at the most fifth on the list of Google hits. And when you actually go into the website, it looks on the face of it as though it might actually have some quite useful information. We've got historical writings, the truth about Martin Luther King, etc. Civil rights movement, pictorial history, all looks quite useful. And you can start clicking into some of these links, but then when you start to look at them, it starts to look a little bit strange. It doesn't really look as if it's showing Martin Luther King in a particularly good light, talking about his doctoral thesis that was copied from the thesis of another student and things like that. So this is something where you perhaps need to dig a little bit deeper. And one of the things you could do is see who the webmaster is, who's hosting this site. So contact the webmaster, click here. And this is what we get. It's actually hosted by an organisation called Stormfront.org, which is a white nationalist resource page. So things start to become a little bit clearer that this is not just a useful resource about Martin Luther King. It's going to be coming at Martin Luther King from a particular and very polarised angle. So that's one thing that you need to be very, very careful of on the internet, because this, as I said, would come up quite high on the list of Google results. And the reason for that is that if you are a webmaster and you know what you're doing and how the algorithms on Google work, you can force Google almost to rank your website quite highly on its list of results in Google. Google don't take money, that's a myth, but there are ways of manipulating it. So making sure that you use your key search terms as much as possible in that website. So Martin Luther King, the more you mention Martin Luther King, the more that Google is going to pick up on that and think that must be a useful site, and it's going to rank it higher. The very fact that it's called martinlutherking.org will affect that. If they also get in touch with their fellow white supremacist organizations and say, we've got a really good website here, can you link into it from your site? So that will be another thing. The more links into the site from other websites will affect how highly it might appear on Google. So that's something very worth bearing in mind, that just because a result comes highly on Google doesn't necessarily mean it's a good result. If we just go back to the timeline again, and if I move forward 10 years to 2010, and we'll just have a look at a quick snapshot from 2010. you can see that the homepage has changed quite drastically, and it's not even bothering to hide the fact that it is actually a white supremacist website with that focus. And even download flyers to pass out at your school. This was aimed at US high school children, so, you know, quite worrying, really. So that's quite an extreme example and quite obvious when you actually get to look at it, but some examples aren't quite so obvious. So we're going to have a look at another slightly more subtle website, which is a page from the American College of Pediatricians on bullying at school. So that all looks very good, doesn't it? On the face of it, the American College of Pediatricians, very official looking, sounds official. And when you get further down, you've got lots of references that you can check up on, which, you know, always looks good on a website. But sometimes you need to do a little bit more digging and actually find out more about this website. And actually, if you start to have a look at the references, some of them might perhaps be a little bit questionable, perhaps. And if you go to About Us and Frequently Asked Questions, quite standard stuff, until you get to here. What was your response to false and malicious claims leveraged by the Southern Polity Law Centre? And if you read that, you kind of think, well, okay, maybe this isn't what all it isn't all what it seems, and I need to dig a little bit further. So I'm going to search for American College of Pediatricians on Google and just see what else I can unearth about them. So it's been referred to as a fringe anti-LGBTQ hate group. So maybe not something that you want to be using without being a little bit more aware of what's going on here. So there's lots of information here. And actually there's a Wikipedia article, and this is where Wikipedia can come in quite handy when you're fact checking. And this is what professional fact checkers often do. They won't look at the article so much as the references at the end to see what they can find. And here, for instance, you've got a letter, the response to the American College of Pediatricians. And it's a statement from the National Institute of Health director. It is disturbing for me to see special interest groups distort my scientific observations to make a point against homosexuality. The American College of Pediatricians pulled language out of context from a book I wrote in 2006, etc., etc. So a lot of information there, and that immediately makes the actual article that we originally looked at look slightly less like a good resource and a balanced resource that you could be using. And in fact, when you then start looking at some of the things that they say here about the bullying, some of the things that they're saying are not necessarily free of bias or free of hate towards any particular groups. So you need to watch out for that. And that's two examples of websites that aren't necessarily all they appear.